In the shadow of the mighty oaks, thousands came to discuss how to rid our country from its shame. They knew the evils of the chains. Thousands of Americans forced to become slaves didn't match with the Constitution, which guaranteed every man would be free. They called themselves Republican in this little town of Jackson, and they knew their fight for this worthy cause would change the nation's fate. They took an oath for unity, and that passion still remains today. Many fights have been won, but many more are still to come. We know it won't be easy to defend this land of the free. The Jackson County Republicans stand together. We are JXN GOP.
Under the Oaks podcast for the Jackson County Republican Party, which will bring you local news that Republicans want to hear. And we're going to have two parts today. And the first part is a conversation with Doug Lloyd, who's running for Attorney General for the state of Michigan, currently the Eaton County Prosecutor. Doug, introduce yourself.
Well, it's great to be here, Marcy. It's great to be here as your guest host today.
Glad to have you. Glad to have you. So, you were recently honored at the PAM Midwinter Conference with a 30-year service award and the prosecution award. Tell us what PAM is and what that recognition means to you.
Sure. The PAM stands for the Prosecuting Attorneys Association of Michigan. Basically, that's the volunteer arm of PAC. PAC is the Prosecuting Attorneys Coordinating Council, which is underneath the Attorney General's office. And, you know, PAM's responsibilities are really to help all 83 83 prosecutors across the state. And their job is really to just make sure that prosecutors are up to date, you know, legislatively, with trainings, with whatever else that they can actually help with. And so for me to be able to go to that conference with my fellow prosecutors and actually be recognized for being a prosecutor for the last 30 years, that was quite the honor because, you know, my start, as you know, happened here in Jackson County. You know, I had the honor to begin working as an assistant prosecutor back in the 90s. You and I worked in that office together.
Yes, we did.
And, you know, so to be able to have stood up for the last 30 years, you know, whenever you go to court and say, I'm here for the people of the state of Michigan, that's a thought that just still makes me smile to be able to do that.
One of the things that was impressed upon us in the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office is that the prosecutor's job isn't to win, it's to do what?
So, to seek justice.
Right.
Right.
Right. I think a lot of times that gets forgotten, especially by the public who if a prosecutor dismisses a case and they don't think that's right, they don't understand that you have rules of law that you have to meet, rules of evidence that you have. You might really, really know somebody did something, but if you don't have evidence that you can admit in court, you don't have a case.
Sure, you're absolutely right. A prosecutor is really, and people don't think about it, they're the original public defender. Mm-hmm. Because all cases that police agencies investigate are sent to the prosecutor's office. And it's up to that prosecutor to decide, are the facts and evidence there that actually allow you to take a case forward to court? And if the facts and evidence aren't there, even if you don't like the guy, you're required, ethically bound to say we're not going to move this case forward into the court system. And so that's really, when you think about it, when people go, well, there's public defenders out there, the defense attorneys. No, it's the prosecutor who's responsible for actually making sure that that person's rights are being protected. Everybody has constitutional rights, the defendant as well as the victim. So it's really important that we make sure that if we're going to take a person into the criminal justice system, we have a firm belief we'll actually be able to convict them.
So you've had a lot of experience inside the Michigan prosecutorial system and some as a defense counsel as well. How does that matter for someone running for attorney general? You're the chief law enforcement officer. Take it from there.
Sure. There's multiple things. If you think about it, there's like 32 units within the attorney general's office. And so that's a lot of different things that those assistant attorney generals are actually doing. When it comes to prosecution, that's the thing that people think about most when they think about the attorney general, is really the prosecution cases that they're bringing forward. And if you're going to be the attorney general, I think I think you have to have actually understood how to prosecute a case. You have to understand how to work with law enforcement, because you're going to work with the Michigan State Police. You're going to work with your own investigators that are inside that attorney general's office. And you have to understand how to actually build that case up. If you don't have that understanding, then you're going to just have a difficulty of actually being able to lead those attorneys. Those attorneys within that office want to do a good job. They're generally there as career public servants. Some of those attorneys have been there 20, 30 years. But you need to make sure that you actually have that experience and that leadership ability to be able to lead them. Actually being able to say that you've prosecuted a case, that you've charged that case, that you've tried a case. Those are all going to be leadership qualities that you have to have when you go to talk to people in that office.
Expound a little more on what Pam does for the 83 county prosecutors across the state.
Sure. Pam is a leadership board, so there are 25 board of directors, and then you have the secretary treasurer, your vice president, your president-elect, and your actual president. I served in all those positions. I'm actually a past president now. And, Pam is really there to support your local prosecutor. They're the ones who provide the actual warrant manuals, all the publications that prosecutors use on a daily basis. If you think about it, every criminal statute out there has to be looked at, as far as, is this something that we might use in a case? And they're all basically, nowadays it's electronic. Back in our days, it was a big book, right, that we carried around. But it's all electronic now, but it's the Pam's responsibility to actually put those publications out there. They do trainings. When you think about it, if you have a domestic violence prosecutor, or you have an elder abuse prosecutor, or you have a drug prosecutor, or maybe you're a county small enough where you're one prosecutor who runs your county, does all those things. Pam actually provides trainings so that your local assistant prosecutors and prosecutors are actually up to date.
Sorry.
So that they're up to date on what the latest laws are, what the latest trainings are on how to better serve the citizens of their communities. And so Pam is really there for that. I mean, there's so many things that Pam actually does. We review all the legislation that comes through the legislature to determine, hey, is this something that we can support? Is it good for the citizens of Michigan? Or is it something that, is just there for a few people that aren't really going to benefit everyone? So many other things are best practices of what are the best practices that your local law enforcement and your local prosecutors can do.
I have heard about attorney general's opinions. For the legislature, do they have to ask you for that, or can you offer it, or does it go both ways?
No, an attorney general opinion has to be asked for by another entity. You don't just see that they're randomly put out by the Attorney General. The most common theme in that is that it will occur from the legislature will ask for an opinion. And understand that, the Attorney General opinions aren't to rewrite the law, or to remove laws. I mean, think about that, right? We just saw Nestle decide to go in and say that a law was unconstitutional that the legislature had used to, pull back $650 million. And what'd the courts say? The court said, well, no, you're wrong. You can't just go in and do that. An attorney general opinion is about addressing something that is gray in the law and bringing forth an answer to it. An answer that then stands until such time as a court actually says, well, no, you couldn't do that, or the legislature actually makes a change in the law to to bring it in accordance with what that attorney general opinion said.
So, how do PAC and PAM work together? How do they cooperate with each other? What?
Sure. PAC is obviously under the attorney general, so that's the aspect of really looking at what is happening in the state itself. So they are the coordinating council that is really directing how things are occurring as far as how are the dollars being spent within the prosecutors association, and then they work with the PAM itself. And that's more of a voluntary organization that has people within it that help with the trainings, but that area is actually more driven by a board of directors. PAC is controlled by the Attorney General itself and has a very small board that looks at the actual actions of what is the prosecuting attorneys, coordinating council actually spending their dollars on.
Sometimes a local county prosecutor will have a conflict in a case, a reason why his or her office should not handle a case. Does the Attorney General assist them with support in that case?
They do, and that how that works is that it's the prosecutor themselves that generally are the ones who have the conflict. Usually, if one of your assistant prosecutors has a conflict, or a legal assistant has a conflict, you can wall them off within your local office. But if the prosecutor has the actual conflict, then they ask the Attorney General to step in. And the Attorney General, they're kind of like the organizer of it. They either have a choice where they can keep the case, or they'll ask the prosecuting attorney, it's a coordinating counsel, to actually send it to a different prosecutor's office. We see that a lot where Barry and Eaton and Ingham and Jackson and Livingston, a lot of times if there's cases that are we have conflicts on, we may come and actually be the substitute prosecutor for that particular case. And that's one of the main things that the coordinating council does, is actually help the Attorney General in farming those out.
So you've held a lot of positions in your leadership role in PAM. Could you expound on those?
Sure. Yeah, I was honored to I became the elected prosecutor in Eaton County in 2013. In 2014, I was nominated and brought on to the board of PAM. And then through that process, I actually worked my way up to a point that I was nominated to join their executive board. So that was 4 years of doing that. And that's really an interesting role, because you really take on the frontline activities, of being requested as part of PAM and as part of being an elected prosecutor to do things such as go testify, in the legislature. And I had that honor of testifying in both the House and the Senate on aspects that were important to the Prosecutors Association, that were important to local prosecutors. And so that was an important thing, as well as being part of the legislative groups that actually determine the laws that are being brought forward, and having those honest discussions with the legislatures where we go, understand your thoughts of how this might be a good idea, but what you're going to bring forward is actually going to hurt more than it is actually help the citizens of Michigan.
That's good to know. What are some examples of some things you personally worked on?
In legislation? Well, gosh, there's been a few. I had the fortunate ability to actually have one of the first canine victim advocates, a black lab named Reagan.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah. Brought him in just months after I became the elected prosecutor. And his sole job was to work with children. and how that started at the group we worked with at the time. It was Leadership for the Blind, and Reagan had started in that process to be a work in that role, and he leaned a little bit, and so because of that, he would not be good as working with the blind.
Dog.
So he transitioned, I called it, over to working with the children and becoming a canine victim advocate. So Reagan actually began working with children, and like I said, he didn't care about politics. He didn't care, about defendants. He didn't care about prosecutors. But when that child walked in that courthouse, he cared about that child, and he made sure to let that child know that I'm here for you. One of the things that we were blessed with, I would say, in Eaton County is that our judges took an acceptance to Reagan. And so Reagan actually would go to the witness stand and would get underneath the witness stand and be there with the child when the child would have to testify in front of a judge or a jury. And think about it. They're getting up there talking about traumatic events that are about child abuse, child rape. And they got to go tell some adults they've never met before. And Reagan.
In a big room with a lot of people.
Right.
Staring at them.
Yeah, staring at them, wanting to hear their story.
And the perpetrator just right over there.
Exactly. Reagan was there for them. I have a day I remember that, my investigator was in charge. He was the handler of Reagan. And Reagan had spent all day on the witness stand with this child on a child sexual assault case. And the children would actually hold the leash of Reagan while, and it was almost like a conduit of the stress they were feeling would go to Reagan. And that first night before Brian, my investigator, and I understood, Reagan went home and he didn't eat, he didn't play, he went immediately into his crate. And Brian called me that night and he's like, I don't know if Reagan's sick or what, but he knew he had been on the stand all 8 hours. And next morning, Reagan popped back up and was ready to do it again. But that was proof.
To decompress.
Yeah, that was proof to us that Reagan really was doing his job. And so Tom Barrett and I, now Congressman Barrett, when he was in the House, actually worked together to pass legislation to guarantee that the prosecutor's offices who took on canine victim advocates would be able to actually bring them in the courtroom.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, so that was one of the pieces of legislation. My last one, we had a serial killer that was out of Ingham County back in the 70s. Killed 4 women up there and then tried to come over to Eaton County and attempted to kill a 13-year-old and 14-year-old brother and sister. Sexually assaulted the sister, tried to strangle her. Randy, the brother, came in, tried to break it up and was stabbed multiple times and strangled and left for dead, but they survived. So the serial killer went off for prison, but all of a sudden he was coming up for parole. Didn't get life behind bars, unfortunately, at that time. And so when they first came up for parole, I worked with them back in 2015 to make sure that he didn't get out. And at that time, the parole board had the ability to, if they came together and unanimously said it, they could say, you know what, we're not going to parole you for 5 years. And that's what they did. So that gave Randy and Lisa time to not think about it, to actually live their lives, right? 2020 comes along and we gear up once again. They get the letter, so that stress and that trauma comes back, and we meet with the parole board. And when we get done, I'm kind of pulled aside and I said, hey, you realize that criminal justice reform that has occurred makes it that we're going to have to review this guy every year. I said, that's ridiculous. I said, so now somebody who has lived with these scars all their life is going to have to, get a letter from the parole board, have that stress come out.
Relive it
every year. So I actually went to Sarah Leitner, y'all's, rep, and she was my representative part at that time too. She had Eaton Rapids before the redistricting. And she actually did a bipartisan thing with my Democrat legislature that I have, because we're a purple county, they worked together to actually bring about reform to bring back that 5-year rule, and the governor actually signed it. And so that meant when we came up for a review the next time with Randy and Lisa, the parole board was able to say, you know what, we're going to all sign off on this and make it 5 years. So now Randy and Lisa have had for the last 5 years the ability to not think about it. Unfortunately, 2027 is around the corner. They'll have to be thinking about it again.
One of the things that I'm sure you must be very proud of is being awarded the Champion of Crime Victim Rights by the Federation, because you supported courtroom access for victims and advocacy and so forth. And you've already talked about the canines, but that's one of those are the reasons you got that award from Crime Victim Rights Federation.
Yeah, I mean, that was a real surprise to me to get that. But, I think it's important, and people often don't think about prosecutors. People think that we just go into court and we're trying to convict people. But there's, besides the fact that we're trying to seek justice within that courtroom, part of seeking justice is actually speaking for the victims and the voiceless. Mm-hmm. So it's important that, that victims are actually heard. And there's been so many times throughout the years where, I talk to people and they feel that, they haven't. And so I've always thought it's a real important thing to make sure that we're actually speaking for those crime victims, because there's more crime victims within our communities than there are actual defendants. But yet they get put aside sometimes for us to only focus on the defendants. It's important that somebody actually stand up and speak for them.
I have on my list that you chaired the Rape Kit Initiative. I recall at one time that Michigan was way behind on processing those. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I was a member of it at that time. And it was, if you remember that in Detroit there was found, thousands of rape kits mm-hmm. that were discovered, and it was, people were surprised and and aghast of, oh my gosh, these are out there,
never processed.
And so the question became across the state is how much more was like that. Mm-hmm. And as we went around the state, we began to find that there actually was. And and it wasn't law enforcement's fault specifically, or the prosecutor's fault. Sometimes it was that a person didn't want to proceed with the case, and because they didn't want to proceed with the case, it got stuck up on a shelf and just not dealt with.
I see.
In other cases, it just got lost sometimes. I mean, I can remember one case where they moved office furniture around and found a kit that had fallen behind a desk.
Oh, my.
Yeah, and had never been dealt with. And so being part of that group was the way for the prosecutors to try to bring order to the chaos that had happened and somehow provide ways that we could try to make sure that, especially with technology changing as fast as it had, that we'd be able to process those kits and be able to, let the individuals know that those kits that came from, hey, maybe we found a match. Do you want to proceed forward?
Uh-huh. So what I'm hearing is that it requires some practical judgment as well as legal theory that you need to apply, and understanding of things like the separation of powers and rules of evidence and all of those things in the Attorney General's office. But when it comes to leadership, there's so many roles that you're going to have in the Attorney General's office because there's so many things that they do. Retail fraud, consumer protection, those are all things handled by the prosecutor's office, I think.
Sure, they are.
The Attorney General's office.
Yeah, I mean, your local prosecutor's office can do that. I helped start in our county an economic crimes unit. And so, we do a lot of those things, consumer protection aspect, the elder abuse cases. I got contacted by an attorney today, to say, hey, I may have found, in my guardian responsibilities, financial elder abuse that occurred, hundreds of thousands of dollars may be missing. That's something our local office would do that, but a lot of offices don't have the ability to do that. And that's where the Attorney General is supposed to step in, they have an elder abuse unit. And it's not one that's always that people are always happy with, and they have the criminal unit, and then on top of that, they have the other responsibilities. We talk about all the time, the Michigan Public Service Commission, right? That's supposed to regulate the actual rates for consumers and DTE and Edison, all of those. You have assistant attorney generals who actually work within that commission to audit what they're doing, as well as having assistant attorney generals whose jobs are to be walled off and go and fight against the regulations that happen within the state. So you have multiple, assistant attorney generals who are doing different things within that state and, within the state and within that organization. So to be a leader in it, you're going to have some knowledge of it. And you're going to have to be able to speak to the people about it. And you're going to have to make sure that you actually take the right individuals and put them into the positions where they can really succeed.
So that requires the executive function of being able to assess people and really leadership in determining how to utilize the employees that you'll have available to you.
It does. It does. I mean,
one employee might fit in one department but not another.
Sure. And that's really where I see that I've had the opportunity to know a lot of assistant attorney generals, and a lot of them are in the spot that works for them. But there's some where I look at and go, why did you get stuck there? And I almost feel that it was just an open position, and so the person just got stuck there. And that's when we see the frustration of the public, when they start going, why is it taking so long, for contracts to be reviewed? Because that's one of the responsibilities of the Attorney General's office, is to review contracts for the state.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Why did those take so long?
So it's your fault the roads are bad.
Yeah. Well, it's not my fault. Yeah.
It's Nestle's fault.
I'll take that responsibility in 2027. But when we talk to people across the state, and they're like, cases have been sitting for years that we've asked for the Attorney General's office to review things, and they haven't yet. When people will call up and say, my son was murdered, you have the case, what are we going to do? And they're told, hey, call back in a year. That's not effective work for the citizens of Michigan. And if we can move faster than that at the county level, I don't understand why the state can't move fast as well.
Well, I know that you have been all over the state. You've been campaigning very hard. I looked at a map that showed the counties, and there's not very many that you've missed. You have the endorsement of many prosecutors around the state. Could you talk about that? Sure.
I mean, that was, the going around the state. I've been blessed to be with my son, Nick, who and he's my youngest son. And when I decided to get in this, I did a lot of due diligence, and I asked around, and I talked to a lot of people, because this wasn't me being courted or pushed in by some specific group to run. This was me looking around going, there's only so many things you can do as your locally elected prosecutor. If you really want to make change in the state, you're going to have to do it at the state level. Mm-hmm. And I saw things that were broken, and I'm not a really good complainer, Marcy. You know that. I'm really more of a fixer. And
he's a get it done person.
Yeah, there you go. And that's kind of how I looked at it. So when I started asking around and doing my due diligence, I talked to a lot of the prosecutors across the state. A lot of these guys I've known and I've respected, and we've worked together, and and it's one of those things that, hey, I'm having trouble, Doug, do you have something that you could help me with? And that's how it's been. So when I approached them and said, if I do this, will you support me? They were on board, and they wanted to endorse. So 62 prosecutors across the state and the UP have endorsed me. I went to sheriffs around the state and said the same thing, and sheriffs are concerned. They feel like they're being attacked by this current attorney general, and they understand. They live at a higher standard themselves, and they're generally the first one to call out something wrong within their group or organization. And so when I told them that I was going to do this, they came out. So I have over 30 sheriffs who endorse me. You know, retired judges, retired prosecutors, they all stepped on board, you know, so that when I walked in day one, and remember, I was the last person on either side, you know, Democrat or Republican, to get in this race. So all of those, you know, individuals that were in before me had the ability to go out and get those endorsements. But it's me who walked in the door when I decided to file the paperwork with all those endorsements.
And you got 62 out of 83, and time is not up yet.
Right. Correct. Yeah. No, I you know, I've had a lot of great conversations with Pete Lucido, the Macomb County prosecutor, and he just endorsed me as well, just last week. And so yes, so there's time left to get the rest of those counties.
So if voters are going to remember one thing about your qualifications, what would you like that to be?
Wow. One thing. 34 years of being an attorney, it's hard to limit it to one thing, but you know, I think you can either go experience or temperament. You know, the understanding that it's easy to make claims, it's easy to just, you know, try to rile up people, but I always tell people to think about it. If you like shows like Law and Order, is that a comedy or a drama? Do you really ever laugh?
It's a fiction.
It's a fiction, but do you ever really laugh in them?
No.
No, those are serious, you know, those are serious shows. And so, you know, I look at that, you know, I'm a serious guy for a reason, you know, and it's important that we actually take these things seriously. But it's going to be the experience that allows us to move forward quickly. Can't have training wheels when you take this job. You know, no one's going to give them to you. You got to be able to go in day one, the day after the election, in my opinion, and actually be able to start that transition so that you can get going.
So what'll that first week look like?
Well, for me, it would start right after the election. You know, I would make the request from the current Attorney General for some cases because, you know, as we travel the state, there are cases that she has filed that a lot of us, you know, question. And not just Republicans. I think just people in general ask, why are we doing this? Well, I want to see them and see, you know, what was the reason? Are we really benefiting the people of the state of Michigan? Second thing would be is to actually meet with those unit chiefs that run those different units. You got 32 people there. That's going to take a little bit of time.
Right.
I want to know their thoughts. I want to know where they're coming from. You know, because think about it. There's only a few spots in the Attorney General's office that are ones that the Attorney General gets to pick and bring in.
Right.
Everything else, they're called civil servants. So they actually have protections under statute. You just can't come in and do a mass firing of the office. And why would you want to? You know, think about it. Your Attorney General has filed lawsuits. They have criminal cases. They have court deadlines. They have responsibilities. If you were to actually start firing people like that, then you're going to have failure to appears. You're going to be held in contempt of court. You're going to have victims that are not being heard. That doesn't make a lot of sense. You want that continuity, and that's what the civil service aspect for those employees allows, you know, it to occur.
Sure, they have certain protections that need to be respected.
Yeah.
And whether somebody, you know, likes it or not, so you want to do it lawfully. Doug, what's the next thing you're on your campaign trail? What's the next thing people should look for?
Well, I think the big thing, I'm sure we have things. If you actually go to votedouglloyd.com, subscribe to my emails. Hopefully delegates, you're getting them. If you're not, and you have Gmail, look in your promotions. You'll probably find that you have like 30,000 emails sitting there. But that's a good way to know what we're doing. Another way is to go to Doug Lloyd Prosecutor on Facebook. If you have that social media, you can find all the other social media there. But my team does a great job of actually putting out our events for the week, and that's, you know, always really important. And then, of course, you're going to have the county convention coming up, and
Right.
And I know you're going to talk more about that, Marcy. But that's another big thing that we have coming up that is going to be really important in that first step to get to the state convention March 28th.
Well, a lot of people don't know that certain offices aren't on a primary, and the Attorney General is one of those offices.
That is correct.
What happens is in the Republican Party is that the elected delegates send delegates from the county convention to the state convention, and then at the state convention they choose who the candidate for the Republican Party in the general election is going to be. And so it's very important that people participate in that. I know a lot of people don't know about precinct delegate. I don't know why. I didn't. They didn't teach that to me in school. I went to work for the legislature and tried to figure out how do you get here and how do these people do this? And it wasn't until I worked for a legislator that I found out about the power of precinct delegates. And this is one of them. It's a very big responsibility, and it takes a lot of effort on your part. What will happen is at the county convention, they will choose delegates to go to the state convention, which is in the Detroit area, and you've got to overcome that hurdle. It's not really the same as a primary.
No, I mean, that's the thing, is that I've had, statewide candidates, like governor, say, I got to go find 1 million people. You just have to find 2,000.
That's what they say.
Sometimes finding, 1 million might be easier than finding the actual 2,000. And so, but I think that's, when I talk to young Republicans, that's what I tell them. Hey, if you want to get into politics at the, the lowest level, but have your name on a ballot, then become a precinct delegate, because you have to be elected in to do that. But with that, if you're going to take on that responsibility, I also think you have to be part of your local party. And that's another thing I always say is that, when I'm talking to the young Republicans, is that get involved with your local party. You need to know what's going on in your community. And I've been lucky to, be part of our Eaton County, local party. And that's all I ever did until I got into this race. This state party politics stuff is all new to me. But at the local level, I have a great relationship with my local party. And I think it's important that if you're going to be a precinct delegate, you got to be involved all the way around. Showing up every 2 years isn't really making the system better.
No, and if you think about it, being a precinct delegate and being active as a precinct delegate and maybe running for the executive committee of your party, that's the beginning of everything. And everybody knows that in order to be successful, you need a good foundation.
Right, you're absolutely
and that's the
right.
Foundation.
Every successful county that I see has a great executive committee. They're willing to spread the work and work together to just do great events. I mean, Jackson County is a perfect example. There's been so many great events that we've been able to come down to, from forums and Lincoln Day dinners, that, y'all do it right down here.
Okay. Well, I wish you the best of luck on your campaign. Give us that website one more time.
It's VoteDougLloyd.com, or Facebook is Doug Lloyd Prosecutor.
There you go. Okay. So now we need to talk about me.
Oh, I'd like to talk about you,
I
Marcy.
am the Michigan Director of Women for Gun Rights. We are nonpartisan. And I know that you're a very strong Second Amendment supporter.
I am.
That's one reason I'm here. And so Women for Gun Rights is a national organization, nonpartisan. And once a year we have what we call a fly-in, where I'm the Michigan director. We have 50 state directors, and we fly into Washington, D.C., and we spend 4 or 5 days there. And we make appointments with our senators and our representatives to advocate for our gun rights. And we have seminars on how to talk to friendlies and how to talk to hostiles, because we don't not talk to somebody just because we know they don't like our ideas. And also you have to do that by being graceful and nice and not confrontational, but rather, all right, we're never going to agree on this. Can we come together on this? And we get training on how to do that. It's been very beneficial at Thanksgiving. So anyway, what we're doing is standing up for our Second Amendment rights. We have the Michigan chapter, I guess you would call it. And in Michigan, our direction this year is going to lean toward repeal of red flag laws and constitutional carry. So that's what we're doing. And we'd love to have you join us. That's at womenforgunrights.org. To sign up is free. We're going to be having a dues section and an educational section. The educational section will be free. The dues section will be a 501c3 so that we can engage in political activity. Right now we're a 501c4, so we can engage in political activities, so nobody can contribute to us and get a tax break. But the 501c3, which is educational, strictly educational, and that's new this year, and this year is our 10th anniversary, so I'm very proud to be a part of that organization. And again, that's womenforgunrights.org.
Sorry for the interruption, folks. We'll get right back to Doug and Marcy in just a moment. I'm Kevin. If you don't know who I am, I'm the producer for the Under the Oaks podcast, as well as a bunch of other shows on the Grandma's Boy Media Digital Network. As I was reviewing the show so I could get it posted so you guys can enjoy it, I found an audio issue. Unfortunately, I couldn't fix it. I had to cut it. But I didn't want you to miss a single thing Marcy's about to tell you about. Luckily, there's only one thing, and that's the 2026 Chili Cook-Off. Get ready, Jackson County. It's time for the most spice-filled event of the year, and what might go down as the most unforgettable face-off of the season. Your very own elected officials have swapped policy papers for ladles and are entering the JXN GOP Chili Cook-Off, and you won't want to miss it. It's all going down March 21st in the JXN GOP headquarters. That's at 209 East Washington, Suite 320. That's the Commonwealth Commerce Center. For those of you that don't know, doors are going to open at 11. Event starts at noon. Tickets are only $5. March 21st, JXN GOP headquarters. Doors at 11. Starts at noon. Tickets are $5. You can get all this information at jxngop.org. You won't want to miss it, guys. 2026 Chili Cook-Off. I'll see you there. Now let's get back to Doug and Marcy.
And we're proud to have motivated, bold young leaders who are ready to roll their sleeves up and take action. And the Jackson GOP Patriot Coalition is growing, and we're taking on young adults who stand for freedom, opportunity, and making an impact. They're doing something with a servant group, and they're defending free speech and protecting individual liberty and promoting limited government. And it's a wonderful thing to get our youth involved here with our own Jackson County chapter of Turning Point. We do have new winter office hours, Monday and Tuesday, open 1 to 5. On Wednesday, 10 to 5. On Thursday, 1 to 5. And then Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we are closed, although we often open for special occasions. So we'd also like the audience out there to know that you can become involved in Jackson GOP at jxngop.org. Membership categories or one-time donations are available on our website, and you can go there and sign up. Kind of go there and poke around. There's a lot of interesting things there. You can find out the history of our party and how we came about Under the Oaks and why our name is Under the Oaks. You can find all those things out on our website. And you can also find out about the 300 Club, which meets the last Saturday of each month at 9 a.m. at Steve's Ranch Restaurant. For information on the 300 Club, go to the website and you'll find it there. And Doug, I think that about wraps it up.
We could have covered a lot more, couldn't we?
Do you have any final words you'd like to leave us with?
I do. I think it's great that I was, with you on the Under the Oaks, because it's so cool when you look back at the history that it was a prosecutor here in the 1850s, Austin Blair, the Jackson County prosecutor, who was one of the people sitting under those oaks, creating the Republican Party. So I think it's great that you and I, both being from the prosecutor's office here in Jackson, got to actually be in the Under the Oaks. And I've just had a great time with you, Marcy.
And got to work together in the early 90s.
Right.
I was able to observe Doug's integrity, and it's impeccable. And I support you 100%.
Well, thank you very much, Marcy.
We are JXNG.